Allison Hammond has spent more than 20 years becoming one of Britain's best-known television personalities. Ever since her memorable appearance on Big Brother, she has built a reputation for making audiences laugh, putting guests at ease, and creating conversations that feel genuine. Her cheerful personality has become her trademark, but behind that warmth is confidence earned through years of live television. That confidence would soon be tested when Prince Harry appeared on This Morning for what many expected to be another friendly celebrity interview. As Harry walked onto the brightly lit studio set, he seemed prepared for a comfortable conversation. The familiar blue sofa, neatly arranged coffee cups, and busy production crew created the relaxed atmosphere viewers expected from the daytime program. The hosts welcomed audiences back from the commercial break before introducing their special guest. Dermot O'Leary smiled toward the camera and announced, "Joining us today is a prince, military veteran, author, and one of the most talked-about public figures in the world. Please welcome Prince Harry." The studio audience applauded politely as Harry entered. He greeted both presenters with quick handshakes before taking his seat. His expression remained serious, and his body language suggested someone determined to stay in control of the interview. Allison greeted him with her usual warmth. "Harry, it's lovely to have you here. How are you, sweetheart?" Instead of smiling, Harry paused. "I'm fine," he replied, though sweetheart feels rather familiar for someone I've only just met. A brief silence settled across the studio. Without appearing flustered, Allison simply smiled. "Sorry, babe, I mean Harry. That's just how I speak. No disrespect." "None taken," Harry answered. "I'm simply pointing it out." With that moment behind them, Allison smoothly moved on. "So, how's life in California? Are you enjoying it?" Harry shrugged. "It's better than being trapped in an institution that never truly valued me." Allison responded calmly. "Trapped is a strong word. You did grow up surrounded by extraordinary privilege." Harry answered, "Palaces aren't homes. They're prisons with better furniture." Dermot stepped in, hoping to lighten the discussion. "California must be a very different experience, though." Harry nodded slightly. "The weather is pleasant, but what matters most is escaping constant tabloid attention." Allison listened carefully before asking another question. "That's interesting because you've done several major interviews since moving, television specials, documentaries, and your memoir. Doesn't that still keep you very much in the public eye?" Harry's expression became more serious. "There's a difference between choosing when to speak and being forced into the spotlight." Allison acknowledged his point but continued, "I understand that. Still, from an outside perspective, you've probably appeared in more media projects since stepping back from royal duties than before. The difference seems to be who controls the story." Harry shifted slightly. "I didn't come here to be psychoanalyzed." Allison laughed gently. "I'm not psychoanalyzing anyone, babe. I'm just asking questions. That's part of the job." Harry replied, "Your questions seem to have a certain edge." She answered with the same relaxed tone. "Really? I've asked how you're doing and how you're finding California. Those are pretty ordinary questions." Sensing the growing tension, Dermot redirected the conversation. "Tell us about your charitable work. What projects are you most proud of these days?" Harry appeared more comfortable discussing the subject. "Our foundation focuses on mental health, supporting veterans, and environmental causes. We're committed to making a meaningful difference." Allison nodded approvingly. "That sounds wonderful. Could you share a particular project or success story you're especially proud of?" Harry hesitated. "People always want specific examples. The work should speak for itself." Allison remained polite but persistent. "It certainly can. But viewers usually enjoy hearing real stories. It helps people understand the impact you're making." She smiled warmly before adding, "I'm sure everyone watching would appreciate hearing about one project that really shows what the foundation has accomplished." The conversation remained courteous, yet it was clear that Allison's friendly style did not prevent her from asking thoughtful follow-up questions, a quality that had made her one of Britain's most respected television presenters. Harry's tone grew noticeably sharper as the interview continued. Looking directly at Allison, he said, "The British public has already made its opinion of me perfectly clear. I don't think I owe them any explanations." Allison's friendly smile remained, but her response was thoughtful rather than defensive. "You don't owe anyone anything, Harry," she replied, "but you're speaking to a British audience about work that you hope people will understand and support. Sharing a few details could help people connect with what you're doing." "I'm not here to recruit donors," Harry answered. Allison leaned forward slightly. "Then why are you here? I'm genuinely interested." The question briefly caught him off guard. "You've said you don't owe the British public anything," she continued. "You've also suggested you've felt rejected here. So, what made you choose British television for this conversation?" Harry paused before replying, "I still have family here. I still have history here." Allison nodded respectfully. "That's understandable. But you've also spoken publicly about difficult family relationships and said you wanted to move beyond that chapter. I'm just trying to understand how those ideas fit together." Before Harry could respond, Dermot O'Leary stepped in. "Let's switch topics. How are you finding fatherhood? I imagine your children keep you busy." For the first time, Harry's expression softened. "They're wonderful," he said with a genuine smile. "Everything I do is for them." "That's lovely," Allison replied warmly. "And how's Megan? I imagine she's enjoying being a mum." The atmosphere shifted almost instantly. "I'd rather not discuss my wife," Harry answered firmly. Allison looked surprised but remained calm. "Really? You've spoken about your relationship quite openly before, in interviews, documentaries, and your book." "That was our decision then," Harry replied. "This is my decision now." "Fair enough," Allison said. "But can you understand why people might find that confusing? Your relationship has been a major part of your public story, and now questions about it feel off limits." "I'm simply setting boundaries." "I respect boundaries," Allison answered. "I'm only saying they seem to change depending on the situation." Harry's voice became more forceful. "I'm not selling anything today." "Perhaps not directly," Allison replied evenly. "But you're appearing on television, discussing your foundation, and presenting your public work. That's still part of building a public image." Dermot shifted uneasily, sensing the tension. "Maybe we should move on." "No," Harry interrupted. "I'd like to address this. You seem to have quite a few opinions about my motives." Allison shook her head. "They're observations, not judgments. You've spoken about wanting privacy while also choosing very public ways to tell your story. I'm simply asking how those things fit together." Harry frowned. "That's judgment." "I don't think so," Allison answered gently. "Pointing out something that appears inconsistent isn't the same as criticizing it. It gives you an opportunity to explain." "I don't need to explain myself." "No, you don't," Allison agreed. "But you've chosen to come on this program, and asking follow-up questions is part of my role. You're free not to answer, but viewers will naturally notice when certain topics become uncomfortable." The studio fell almost completely silent. Crew members exchanged nervous glances as the usually relaxed morning show took on a far more serious tone. Harry shifted in his seat and briefly looked as though he might stand before settling back down. "This isn't the interview I expected," he admitted. "What were you expecting?" Allison asked. "Something warmer, less like an interrogation." She smiled. "I've been warm throughout. I've welcomed you, spoken politely, and treated you with kindness. The only thing I haven't done is accept every answer without asking another question." She paused before continuing. "If warmth means never challenging anyone, then I think we're talking about different things." Harry replied quietly, "I expected basic respect." "And I believe you've had it," Allison answered. "Respect doesn't mean agreement, and it doesn't mean avoiding difficult questions." Dermot quickly redirected the conversation again. "Let's talk about your military service. That's something you've often described as deeply meaningful." Harry relaxed slightly. "It was the most important period of my life. It taught me discipline, responsibility, and service." "I truly respect that," Allison said sincerely. "But help me understand one thing. You've spoken passionately about service, yet you later stepped away from royal duties to pursue your own path. How do you personally reconcile those two choices? Harry answered, because the institution became toxic. I'm sure the situation was complicated, Allison replied thoughtfully. I'm simply asking how your understanding of service evolved over time, because that's something many people are genuinely interested in hearing. Harry took a slow breath before answering Allison's latest question. His expression had become noticeably more strained, and the calm confidence he had shown at the beginning of the interview seemed to be fading. You talk about service, Allison said carefully, and you've often spoken about how the military taught you discipline, responsibility, and putting others first. Then you chose to step away from royal life to pursue a different path. Both decisions can be completely valid, but they're based on different ideas. How do you personally reconcile those two? Harry's face tightened. You have no idea what I experienced in that family, he replied. Allison nodded with genuine understanding. You're right. I don't know everything. I only know what you've chosen to share publicly through interviews, documentaries, and your book. You've spoken openly about painful experiences, and I don't doubt that those experiences were difficult. She paused before continuing. But going through hardship doesn't mean people stop asking questions. It doesn't automatically resolve every inconsistency people think they see. Someone can sympathize with what you've been through while still wanting to understand your decisions. Those two things can exist together. Harry folded his arms. I understand that perfectly well. Do you? Allison asked gently. Because whenever a challenging question comes up, it seems to become personal. Instead of explaining your position, the conversation often shifts toward the pain you've experienced. That may explain your perspective, but it doesn't always answer the question. The atmosphere in the studio became increasingly tense. Harry suddenly rose from the sofa, causing several members of the production team to glance toward one another. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who doesn't even know me. Allison remained seated, looking up at him calmly. I don't claim to know you personally, Harry, she replied. I'm responding to the image you've presented publicly. My job is to ask about what you've chosen to share, and there's a difference between answering questions and avoiding them. I've been honest. I think you've been defensive, Allison answered evenly. Those aren't necessarily the same thing. Honesty means engaging directly with what's being asked. Defensiveness often turns every question into something that feels like an attack. Harry pointed toward her. You've been hostile from the moment I sat down. The comment seemed to surprise Allison more than offend her. She smiled slightly. Hostile? She shook her head. I've interviewed politicians, actors, musicians, athletes, and ordinary people going through incredibly difficult moments. People usually describe me as warm, sometimes too warm. She laughed softly. If this counts as hostility, then I think we're using very different definitions. She continued in the same measured tone. I've asked about your work, your family, your life, and the things you've spoken about publicly. Those are standard interview topics. That's journalism, even if it's a very gentle version of it. Harry picked up his glass of water, then placed it back on the table untouched. This interview is over. Dermot immediately stepped forward, hoping to calm the situation. Perhaps we can take a moment and reset. Before he could continue, Allison spoke. I'm not going to pretend I didn't mean my questions, she said. I asked them because I believed they were fair. Harry looked at her in disbelief. Fair? You've questioned my choices, my family, and my life. I've asked about the things you've publicly discussed, Allison replied. If those questions feel overwhelming, perhaps it's worth asking why they do. My life isn't fragile. Then why do simple follow-up questions seem to provoke such strong reactions? She asked quietly. You agreed to come here. Surely you expected people would want to understand your views. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then Allison's voice softened. Harry, I genuinely feel compassion for what you've experienced. I believe some of the criticism you've received has been unfair, But I also wonder whether you've spent so long protecting yourself that every difficult conversation now feels like an attack." Harry turned toward the edge of the studio. "I'm leaving." Allison nodded respectfully. "That's your choice." As he paused near the exit, she added one final thought. "I didn't come from privilege. My life has had its own challenges, and those experiences taught me that kindness and honesty can exist together. Asking respectful questions isn't the opposite of compassion. Sometimes it's part of showing genuine interest." Allison remained calm as the tension in the studio continued to rise. Looking directly at Harry, she spoke with the same steady tone she had maintained throughout the interview. "I didn't grow up surrounded by privilege," she said. "I've worked hard to get where I am today. I know what it feels like to worry about paying bills, raising a child, and wondering how everything will work out. Those experiences shaped me." She paused before continuing. "That doesn't mean your struggles aren't real. They clearly are, but they're different from mine, just as everyone's challenges are different. The problem isn't that we've had different lives, it's that you've treated reasonable questions as personal attacks." Harry's expression shifted rapidly. Frustration gave way to embarrassment, followed by a brief look of uncertainty. "You don't understand my life," he replied. "No," Allison answered honestly. "I don't know everything you've lived through, but I do know what's happened here today." She gestured gently toward the sofa. "Two presenters welcomed you warmly. We asked about your work, your family, your experiences, and your future. Those are ordinary interview topics, yet nearly every question was met with suspicion or defensiveness." For a moment, Harry said nothing. "I remember a version of you," Allison continued. "Someone who seemed eager to connect with people and who appeared comfortable having open conversations. Today, I haven't seen much of that person." The words appeared to affect him. His expression softened for a split second before the guarded look returned. "I don't need to stand here listening to this." "No," Allison agreed. "You don't." She spoke without anger. "You're free to leave whenever you want, but walking away won't make difficult questions disappear. They don't stop existing simply because a conversation ends." Harry turned and began walking toward the edge of the studio. Before reaching the exit, he stopped and looked back. "You'll regret this interview." Allison slowly shook her head. "I don't think I will," she replied. "I asked fair questions respectfully. I haven't said anything I need to take back." Then she added quietly, "But I hope you don't end up regretting how today unfolded," she continued, her voice filled more with concern than criticism. This was supposed to be a friendly morning conversation. Instead, it became a confrontation. That doesn't strike me as strength. It strikes me as someone carrying a great deal of frustration." Harry looked at her for several seconds. It was impossible to know exactly what he was thinking, but he offered no reply. Without another word, he turned, walked off the set, and disappeared behind the studio doors. The sound of the closing door echoed through the room. Silence followed. After a long pause, Dermot looked toward Allison. "I certainly wasn't expecting that." She took a deep breath before turning toward the camera. Although her familiar smile returned, viewers could sense disappointment behind it. "I'd like to apologize to everyone watching at home," she said. "This wasn't the conversation we had planned. We hoped for an honest, enjoyable interview about Harry's life and current work." She continued calmly. "I also want to make something clear. I didn't intend for any part of this to become confrontational. I asked the same kinds of questions I ask every guest who joins us. How someone chooses to respond is entirely up to them." Dermot nodded in agreement. "I've worked alongside Allison for years," he said. "She's one of the warmest people you'll ever meet." Allison smiled slightly. "Warmth isn't the same thing as avoiding honest conversations," she added. "Sometimes genuine respect means asking thoughtful follow-up questions." Looking directly into the camera once more, she offered a final reflection. "If Harry ever watches this, I hope he knows there was never any personal hostility from me." I believe he's experienced difficult things, and I genuinely wish him well. I simply think that pain and public life can be complicated, and conversations about those experiences are never easy. The interview had lasted barely 20 minutes, yet its impact lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Viewers debated whether the questions had been fair, whether the responses had been justified, and whether the conversation could have unfolded differently. One thing, however, seemed clear from the exchange. Kindness and confidence can exist together. A warm personality does not prevent someone from asking direct questions, and a respectful interview can still include moments of challenge. The discussion became memorable not because voices were raised, but because two very different expectations of a public conversation collided on live television.